My father tore up my college acceptance letter at dinner and said, "No daughter of mine is wasting money on college." My grandmother quietly stood up, took my hand, and said, "Go pack, you'll be starting in the fall." Then she slid one envelope across the table, and my father stopped smiling. "Hello, everyone. My name is Claire Whitmore. I'm 18 years old, and the night my father tore my college acceptance letter into tiny pieces, he looked me straight in the eyes and said, 'No daughter of mine wastes money on college.'" The entire dining room went silent. I stared at the torn pieces scattered across my dinner plate. 4 years of studying, hundreds of late nights, dozens of scholarship applications, every dream I'd carefully built, reduced to scraps of paper, floating in mashed potatoes. My mother lowered her head. She didn't say a word. My younger brother froze with his fork halfway to his mouth. Only one person moved. My grandmother quietly placed her fork beside her plate. She folded her napkin, buttoned her coat, walked around the table, took my trembling hand, then looked directly at my father. "Go pack your suitcase," she told me. "You start college in the fall." My father laughed. Then Grandma slid one thick envelope across the table. His smile slowly disappeared. If you'd asked anyone in our small town what kind of father Richard Whitmore was, most people would have called him hardworking, reliable, traditional. They wouldn't have been wrong. Dad worked 6 days a week, running a successful construction company. He never missed a mortgage payment, never left food off the table. He loved our family, in his own way. The problem wasn't that he didn't love me. The problem was that he believed my future had already been decided before I was even born. According to Dad, boys built careers, girls built families. Everything else was unnecessary. My younger brother Luke was only 16. Dad had already started teaching him the business. Every Saturday morning, they left before sunrise. Construction sites, equipment, estimating jobs. Luke enjoyed spending time with Dad, but even he admitted one afternoon, "I don't think I actually want this." "What do you want?" "I like computers." "You should tell Dad." He laughed nervously. "I'd rather wrestle a bear." I understood exactly what he meant. Growing up, I'd always loved figuring out how things worked. When my bicycle chain slipped off, I repaired it myself. When our washing machine broke, I found the instruction manual before Dad even came home. By middle school, math had become my favorite subject. Physics soon followed. My teachers constantly encouraged me. "You should study engineering." The idea fascinated me. Designing bridges, buildings, renewable energy systems, creating things that lasted. Every time I mentioned engineering at home, Dad smiled politely, then changed the subject. By high school, he'd stopped pretending. "Engineering, that's not practical." "It is, for men." "You'll change your mind." "I won't." He sighed. "Claire, college fills young people's heads with nonsense. You'll meet a nice man, get married, have children. That's a better investment." Mom rarely disagreed with him, not because she lacked opinions, because years of arguing had taught her it accomplished nothing. Instead, she quietly supported me however she could, driving me to science competitions, helping edit scholarship essays after Dad went to bed, smiling every time another acceptance email arrived. "I believe in you," she'd whisper. I just wish I were brave enough to say it louder. Senior year became a whirlwind. Advanced placement classes, engineering competitions, volunteer tutoring, college applications. I applied to 6 universities. Honestly, I would have been thrilled to attend any of them. Then one rainy Thursday afternoon, a large envelope arrived. Northwestern College of Engineering. My hands shook so badly, I could barely open it. "Congratulations." I never read another word before screaming. Mom came running into the kitchen. "What happened?" I handed her the letter. She covered her mouth. "Oh, Claire, you did it." I laughed and cried at the same time. Then I reached the second page. Scholarship Award, Academic Excellence Scholarship, Housing Grant, Research Fellowship. Together, they covered almost everything. I would only need a small student loan for personal expenses. Mom hugged me. "So your father can't say money is the problem." I smiled. For once, he can't. Grandma insisted we celebrate. She baked my favorite apple pie. Even Luke looked excited. "You'll be designing skyscrapers someday." I laughed. "Let's survive freshman calculus first." The family dinner was scheduled for Sunday evening. I honestly believed Dad would be proud, maybe surprised, maybe even emotional. I'd rehearsed what I wanted to say all weekend. After everyone finished eating, I stood up. "I have some news." Dad looked up. "What is it?" "I got accepted." "Accepted where?" I handed him the letter. "And I received scholarships." He silently read the first page, then the second, then looked at me. His expression never changed. "So, you actually applied?" "Yes, I worked really hard." He slowly folded the papers. Then, without warning, he tore them in half. Once, twice, again, again. Tiny white pieces drifted across the table like snow. Mom gasped. Luke stood up. Dad, he ignored him. Then Dad looked directly at me. No daughter of mine wastes money on college. The conversation is over. I couldn't breathe. I stared at the shredded acceptance letter lying across my dinner plate. 4 years. Gone. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The clock on the kitchen wall ticked loudly. Then, Grandma quietly set down her fork. She stood, buttoned her coat, walked around the table, took my hand. Her voice remained perfectly calm. Claire, go pack. You start college in the fall. Dad laughed. With what money? Grandma didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her purse, removed a thick cream-colored envelope, and slowly slid it across the table toward him. Dad smirked, then glanced at the name written across the front. His smile disappeared. For the first time in my entire life, I saw my father speechless. Sometimes, the loudest person in the room believes they've already won. My father watched my grandmother slide that envelope across the table with complete confidence. He had no idea she'd spent years preparing for the exact moment someone tried to take my future away. Nobody spoke. The dining room felt frozen. Dad stared at the cream-colored envelope lying in front of him. Across the front, in my grandmother's careful handwriting, were 4 simple words. For Richard Whitmore. He slowly opened it. Inside wasn't a check. It wasn't cash. It was a folder containing copies of legal documents. Dad frowned. What is this? Grandma finally spoke. For the last 10 years, I've been putting money aside for Claire. He laughed nervously. You've what? She folded her hands. The day she told me she wanted to become an engineer, I opened an education trust. The room became silent again. Dad flipped through the papers. Investment statements, trust documents, bank records, every page professionally prepared. Grandma looked directly at him. I sold the lake cabin after your father passed away. You remember that? He nodded slowly. I invested a portion of the money. For her. My father's face lost all color. The trust is worth enough to pay for every year of college, books, housing, and if anything remains, it belongs to Claire. Dad looked stunned. You planned this without telling me. Grandma answered calmly. I hoped I'd never need to. She looked toward me, but I also knew there might come a day when someone tried to decide her future for her. She turned back to my father. I was prepared. He looked at the torn pieces of my acceptance letter, then at the folder, then back at Grandma. You went behind my back. No, I protected my granddaughter. You undermined me. No, you underestimated her. For the first time, Dad had no response. Grandma squeezed my hand. Go upstairs. Pack what you need. I'll wait. I looked at my mother. Tears streamed down her face. She quietly whispered, I'm sorry. I nodded gently. I know. 20 minutes later, I carried 2 suitcases downstairs. Luke hugged me so tightly, I almost cried again. You better come home with an engineering degree. I laughed. I'm going to try. He whispered, I'm proud of you. Dad remained standing beside the dining room table. He still hadn't moved. As Grandma and I reached the front door, he finally spoke. If you leave, don't expect to come back. Grandma answered before I could. She won't need to. Then we walked outside. The next 4 years became the hardest and happiest of my life. College wasn't easy. Engineering was exactly as difficult as everyone warned me it would be. Calculus, physics, structural analysis, late-night labs, group projects that lasted until sunrise. There were moments I questioned whether I belonged. Every single time, Grandma reminded me, you earned your place. She called every Sunday, never missed one. Sometimes we'd talk about classes, sometimes we'd just talk about the weather. But she always ended every call the same way. I'm proud of you. Those 4 words carried me through more difficult nights than she'll ever know. Meanwhile, Dad never called, not once. Mom occasionally sent birthday cards. Luke texted whenever he could, mostly updates. Dad still wants me to take over the construction company. A year later, I switched my major to computer science. I smiled. Maybe watching me leave had changed something after all. During my senior year, I accepted a position with one of the country's largest engineering firms. The starting salary was more money than anyone in my family had ever imagined earning at my age. When I graduated, Grandma sat in the front row. As I walked across the stage, she stood before anyone else, clapping, crying, smiling wider than I'd ever seen. After the ceremony, she hugged me and whispered, I knew what? That no one could tear up your future. 5 years passed. I became a licensed structural engineer, led bridge restoration projects across 3 states. Eventually, I bought my own home, not enormous, just comfortable, built with my own savings. One autumn afternoon, I received a phone call from Luke. Can we talk? Of course. It's Dad. What about him? The construction company is struggling. Several major contracts had fallen through. Competition had increased. Dad was nearing retirement. Luke had chosen another career. There isn't anyone to take over. I listened quietly. Then Luke added, he wants to see you. A week later, I walked into the same dining room where my acceptance letter had been torn apart. Everything looked smaller than I remembered. Dad looked older, much older, gray hair, slower steps. He stood when I entered. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, he looked at me. I was wrong. I waited. I thought protecting you meant keeping you close. I understand. No, I wasn't protecting you. I was protecting my own beliefs. His voice shook. I almost stole your future, because it didn't look like the future I imagined. I looked around the room. I spent years being angry. I know, but Grandma taught me something. What? That forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It simply refuses to let it control the future. He lowered his head. I'm sorry, Claire. I should have been the one cheering when you got that acceptance letter. Instead, I tore it apart. I smiled gently. You tore the paper, not the opportunity. For the first time in years, he smiled too. Epilogue. Soft piano becomes lighter, carrying gratitude instead of heartbreak. Grandma lived long enough to see me become the engineer she'd always believed I could be. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony for my first bridge project, she insisted on taking a picture beside the dedication plaque. She kept that photograph on her living room wall until the day she passed away. Today, it's framed in my office. Luke now works as a software engineer. He often jokes that Grandma secretly rescued both of us. He's probably right. Dad eventually retired. These days, we have dinner together once a month. Not because the past disappeared, but because we finally learned how to talk honestly about it. My thoughts. Looking back, the most important thing Grandma gave me wasn't the education fund. It was certainty. She believed in me before I had achieved anything. She believed in my future when it existed only as a dream. Sometimes, one person's faith is enough to carry you through years of doubt. My father believed tearing up one acceptance letter would end my education. He forgot something important. Dreams aren't written on paper. They're carried inside people. Paper can be torn. Determination cannot. And every time I drive across one of the bridges my team helped build, I smile. Because somewhere, I know Grandma would smile too. She didn't just help send me to college. She helped build the life waiting on the other side of it.